Hello, everybody. Pascal here from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm talking again to Stanislav Krapivnik, a former US Army officer, supply chain executive, and military political expert. Stas, welcome back to the channel.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for saying yes. I want to do an update with you about your assessment, first of Ukraine, and then secondly also about some of the backgrounds of what's going on in Israel. But can we start with Ukraine? And you recently gave an interview in RT where the anchor asked you, can the Ukrainians turn it around? And you said flat out no. Can you maybe tell me a little bit why you think that this is done for the Ukrainians and why even NATO can't help anymore at this point?
Well, NATO can prolong this, and they can prolong it in different ways. With weapons, to some degree, they can prolong it. They can continue prolonging it by sending NATO mercenaries, where you've had whole battalions of, for example, the Poles, the whole battalions quit, and show up on the Russian front lines. I think no, Karol Novorisk, the new president. Poland has been stepping away from that very quickly, and now they're arguing with the Banderites over Bandera, as a matter of fact, because I think when he came into power, he saw that there's been around 10,000 Poles killed in the fighting as combat soldiers. I think that gave him a very big wake-up call, something that Duda was hiding as much as possible. Duda was out to create Rzecz Pospolita, which is the Polish Empire. He was for the Third Polish Empire. There's lots of other NATO. I mean, I've been on areas of the front line as early as the 24th of December in 2022, where on the other side there were no Ukrainians. It was all Poles.
But this is not known in the West, and I have
Right.
no way of checking whether what you're saying is true or not. Like, what are the indications that we have that this is actually going on?
Well, Russia actually, after Kursk, Russia published names and told and identified mercenaries where they could. Because you got to remember, the Ukrainian side lost over 70,000 dead and missing. Well, if they're missing, you just count them dead for the most part. And okay, so for the faint-hearted, switch off the volume right now. A lot of those dead that are littered all over the forests of southeastern or southwestern Kursk, and that's only 10% of the actual Kursk province. That's all they grabbed, was about 10%. Between the dogs, the feral pigs, and the rats, some of whom are literally without the tail, are this big. There's not much left. Bones. I mean, they will pick everything clean, and the crows. So identifying people, it gets harder, obviously. But they identified, the Russian military identified, either through documents or through mostly through documents on the bodies, about 2,000 dead Poles, about 1,200 dead Colombians. And it went on down that list. There was about 1,000 dead Georgians, and these were Saakashvili's people, who have now fled Georgia and are all fighting in the Georgian Legion, including about 190 something Americans, about 140 Brits, and so on. So a very large mercenary presence, and those are killed. So you don't know how many ran away before that, and those have been identified as these ethnicities,
Yeah,
nationalities.
so we've always had these mercenary groups, and how much they were actually sent by their countries or by NATO. It's still something to uncover then for historians, but once we've got the documents. But we now, just this week, we hear all of this noise about the drones in Poland, right?
Mhm.
And at this point, I read the mainstream media, and I have no way
Right.
of checking whether these things are actually there, whether this was made up, whether these are intentionally flown drones, as is being reported in the West, or whether this is due to jamming, like tens of drones that just went into Poland. What do you make out of this story?
Okay, so there's several issues here that could be at play. First of all, let's begin with the fact that these were recon drones. They had no warheads on them. Second of all, yes, there have been drones that were landed or shot down. There are about four of them. Looks like one of them crashed on its own and three were taken down. And let's then begin with the fact that these drones have a range of about 700 kilometers, and they show up 1,200 kilometers away. what the Russian military said was, and very well. I mean, the Russian defense ministry called the Polish defense minister, said, "Look, let's talk. You want to come over and check our logs? You know, you can see we're in flight patterns because they've suddenly extended quite a bit. So there's other options available here. Well, they're Gurain style or Shahid. Yes, the original Shahid drones came from Iran. Since then, Russia has evolutionized them. They're on the third, fourth generation. They're much bigger. They have much longer range. The actual strike drones. They have jet engines on some of them that they now put on there. So they look nothing like the original drones except the basic shape. Now, the Americans are manufacturing, and they declared this about a month and a half ago, to great fanfare, the Shahid drone. They just made a copy of it, right? And you look at it, I don't know, I guess it has stamps of made in the USA on there somewhere, but you look at them, they look absolutely identical, down to the little propeller in the background and that little lawnmower engine noise, because that's literally like a little lawnmower moped engine in it. But so it could be American made, or it could be any of these the recon drones are used for two purposes. They're not really so much used to look down at things and finding areas. Those are different drones. They're used for information gathering. The recon in that they fly out and they draw fire on themselves, right? They're the expendables. And once the anti-aircraft system has identified its position by firing on those, switched on its radars, the launchers are usually separated some distance away, usually by cables or by radio, they're interfaced. But once the launcher launches, it identifies itself. And then the next wave that's shortly coming after that now has the locations of the radars and the anti-aircraft launchers, and they zero in on those and destroy those. Now, there are losses, and there are losses in recon. There are losses in actual strike drones. Ukrainians do have some success in bringing them down. So once you bring them down, do you reprogram them and then send them into Poland? We know for a fact that the missile that struck and killed two Poles was Ukrainian. In fact, Duda, now that he's out of power, admitted that to a journalist that said, yes, we know Ukraine's trying to pull us into this war for us to fully be, not unofficially as mercenaries, but to have the Polish army fully be engaged in this war. We know that Ukraine sent that missile in and struck Poland as they were trying to play it off as a Russian missile. We just didn't respond to it, but we knew they were trying to pull us in. So now this is on an official level that Ukraine has tried this. Are they doing this again?
I mean, just like with that story of that missile in Poland, like 1.5 years or 2 years ago, it's if it's true that these drones were sent from Russia, it would just be a foolish thing to do for Russia, because it gives the Poles and the NATO people all they need in order to, do what they're doing right now. Article 4, and we're under attack, and we need to support Ukraine even more. I mean, that's obviously the opposite of what, strategically speaking, Russia would want. But the Western or the Europeans keep saying like that the Russians are testing us. They're testing us because they're coming. I'm telling you, they're coming. Can you somehow speak to that? Because there's no way of dismantling the logic inside that asylum.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a very good way of putting it. And inside that asylum is an echo chamber, and all the psychopaths are sitting in that echo chamber, and all they hear is their own thoughts back at them. Yeah. Okay. Again, Russia knows, and it's been admitted by NATO. NATO can only cover about 5 to 10% of NATO airspace with the existing anti-aircraft systems. If Russia was going to strike Poland, it would have been a strike on those military bases that are used as logistics hubs to move equipment into Ukraine. They're used as training bases, and there wouldn't be a lot left of them. I mean, let's be realistic. But again, who benefits? That's the underlying question of everything. Who benefits? Does Russia benefit by throwing in a dozen recon drones, which, by the way, have flown twice as far as their fuel capacity? But we'll ignore that little fact. Does Russia benefit from doing this to Poland? No, of course it doesn't benefit. There's no benefit in any of this. Does Russia benefit from blowing up Nord Stream? Of course it doesn't benefit from blowing up Nord Stream. Does Russia benefit from almost anything that Russia has been accused of doing? No, they don't benefit from everything. Who benefits? Well, van der Leyen benefits. Tusk, who's one of her creatures, was the first one beating the drums. We gotta go to war. We gotta go to war. We gotta go. And Sarkozy, or otherwise known as Mr. Applebaum, whose son is in the U.S. military. Think about that. The French foreign minister is not only married to an American, a prominent neocon, but his son serves in the U.S. Army. The Polish
I didn't even know.
foreign minister. Yeah, most people don't. He doesn't advertise that.
I knew about Applebaum and his wife, but not about the.
Oh yeah.
Anyhow,
I found that out from a good friend of mine who's a doctor of history, and he's very Polish, lived in Canada, and is now living in Poland again. And he's like, yeah, let's talk about this whole setup. So, of course, Russia doesn't benefit from this.
okay,
Certain parties benefit from that.
now, whatever it is, I mean, it continues and drags on this inner European hubris about we're doing something, when in matter of fact, all you do is to prolong the suffering, and you're bleeding out this conflict even more.
Yeah.
How do you think that Russia is interpreting all of this nonsense, like internal talk of the Europeans, when the Russians signaled that they do have a serious interest in talking to the Americans, right?
Well, what you just said is exactly how Russia sees it. The job here is to bleed Russia out to the last Ukrainian, quite literally. The government in Ukraine, believe me, even if there was no conflict, none of these people are ever planning of dying of old age in Ukraine. Their job is to steal everything you can and run for the hills. Yamarov is a great example. He was Minister of Defense for a year. In that time, he managed to steal about $100 million, which is small scale compared to a lot of these guys. Buy up a bunch of properties in the U.S., and his whole family's been living in the U.S. since 2016, including his wife and kids. And they all have a little property under a different LLC, and they change hands, so it's hard to track who's who. And hard for any future Ukrainian government to try to confiscate it back. But he stayed in Ukraine to earn, and that's what all these guys. Zelensky's another prime example. His parents live in a mansion in Israel that he bought for them for $6 million. His wife and kids are in London. And by the way, about 4 months ago, there was an article in the news, in the English news, not the English language news, but even the English news, that Zelensky bought an investment bank for the small sum of 1.5 billion pounds. He also bought a casino hotel in South Cyprus. That came out from an admission from the president of Cyprus, or South Cyprus, the Republic of South Cyprus, and so on and so on. So these guys, they're there to earn. And the longer this conflict continues, they're earning. And then for Zelensky, too, he's got a problem. He's probably going to get very room temperature the moment this conflict's over, because his masters, the Americans and the British, are not going to let a guy like Zelensky walk around yapping and running his tongue when he knows way too much. He was in the center of all this, and it's going to get very embarrassing for them if he says something that he shouldn't be saying, or God forbid, falls into Russian hands, and then winds up really, really opening up about everything. People like that, they don't stay alive for very long. They get room temperature.
I mean, just strategically speaking, I mean, for the Western coalition of the willing, it would be way better to have a martyr Zelensky who's dead than the living clown show he is somewhere in London or in Florida. I mean, it's much more useful. So in any way you think about it, like Zelensky's life is under dire threat, which makes me wonder whether he actually does have some incentive that we haven't thought about before to somehow come to an agreement that would allow him to wind this down. I doubt it. It's just the optimist in me that wonders if there's anything that can turn this around for Ukraine, inside Ukraine.
The only way Zelensky comes out of this alive is if he sneaks out, runs up to the Belarus border, and surrenders to Lukashenko, and then goes off to Russia. Sure, he'll wind up sitting in a jail, but Russia's death penalty is on moratorium, as opposed to the unofficial death penalty that's waiting for. Because you're right, first of all, he's a cokehead. As you know, with any serious drug addict, They're unpredictable. They're under stress. They'll do and say just about anything, and you can't really control them because they're drug addicts. They're in an altered state of being, if you want to call it that. And additionally, he's not the type of person after, first of all, he's an actor. So he likes the limelight. He liked the limelight before all this. For however many years, he's been the darling of Europe. Everybody's been kissing his feet, his arse, and his hands. He likes that. I mean, let's not let's not deny that. He loves that.
But all
And
leaders
now,
are like that. I mean, that's just
right.
pathological like concept of the people in the top ranks.
I
They
won't say all leaders are
support
like
it.
that, but the majority are like that, probably. The majority. But the problem here is now what are you going to tell him? Go to your mansion in Miami and disappear and live peacefully and don't come out? He's not going to do that. Everybody knows that. He may do that for a little while, but the itch is going to be there. The itch is always going to be there. He wants the limelight. And how do you get to be the limelight when you're a former head of state, especially like this? You start talking.
Yeah, but he must understand how dangerous his position is. And we've seen, I mean, just to bring it also back to like some of the developments we've seen like Ukrainians in Spain, mid-high ranking people in the formal structure being assassinated on the street, right? So the infighting within this group of looters is going on, right? So do you have any knowledge of what the power fight, the power struggle within the Ukrainian scheme might be?
You know, there was an old saying with Ukraine, well, post-Soviet Ukraine. In Ukraine, uh, first you make the money, then you become the politician. Oh, I'm sorry. That's usually that's the West. In Ukraine, first you become the politician, then you make the money.
Mm.
So they all go into politics. There are no honest. Well, I won't say no because that's it's never 100%. But the vast majority of Ukrainian politicians, regardless of what parties they were in, were never honest brokers. Okay, and fine if a politician steals a little or takes a little, as long as he's working for the people. The people will forgive him a lot. Fine, he got an extra car, but look what he's done for the country. But there is no concept here of that. The political class in Ukraine for 30 years has been a leech, a parasite. They're there for one reason, to feed off of the state. You look at a country that left the Soviet Union debt-free, which, by the way, is why Russia got all the nuclear missiles because it is the direct inheritor of the Soviet Union. And not only did it get the nuclear missiles, it also got the entire Soviet debt that was spent on all of these other republics, first and foremost. So the industrialization of Ukraine and all that, Russia got to pay for it, and then Russia got to pay for it again. So Ukraine left the Soviet Union. People don't talk about that, by the way. Ukraine left the Soviet Union with an economy, an industrial and scientific base, and population the size of France. By the late uh, teens, early 2000, right before the conflict, I remember somebody compared Ukraine to being as poor as Uganda. And the Ugandan president was very insulted and came out and said, "We are not as poor as these people. We live much better than the Ukrainians." Which, I mean, how much do you have to steal nonstop to go from the level of France in under 30 years to the level of the poorest countries in Africa?
Yeah. Although in the defense of Ukraine, all of this happened on the behest of the West and the neoliberal shock therapy and so on. The same thing that I mean the same looting that happened in Russia. It's just there were then countermeasures taken, and we can see how you have different leaderships also in Ukraine that also were actually peddling or working with that or on that. And the question then is, did you have leaders that were more neutralist minded like Yanukovych or more West aligned like what was her name, Timoshenko?
Timoshenko.
And
And when you ask what kind of power plays are in power, Timoshenko's there. You got to remember too is the Zelensky has banned 17 opposition parties.
yes.
And when you're banning that many parties, opposition gets to be a very gray area. It includes people that go, "Hey, I wanted to steal that. Not, I don't want to give you that. I wanted to steal. Uh, for example, his benefactors that brought him to power are now sitting behind bars, not because he disagreed with them politically, but because he wanted what they had. And it just becomes a den of thieves, but not like a guild of thieves where they have a guild master and they're all kind of aligned to make money, but, thieving,
Yeah.
but a den of thieves where everybody's out to steal from everybody else and any victim that happens to be walking by too while you're at it. And that's the political atmosphere in Ukraine. And then you add the war, and it becomes a survival den of thieves. So they're quite literally not just willing to steal from each other; they're quite willing to slit each other's throats. Kaluba, Kaliba, who's the former ambassador to the wet liverwurst chancellor of Germany. Kaliba was the Ukrainian ambassador there. He just ran to Poland. And in the middle of the night, he ran off because he had a falling out with Zelensky. So it gets to be deadly serious business in this case.
Yeah. Okay. We would need many more minutes, hours in order to unpack this, because the level of political intrigues also is actually increasing, and we didn't even talk about the military yet, and Zaluzhny and what's the guy's name in London. I mean, there's even more there. But
Zaluzhny.
Zaluzhny is the one in London? No, Zaluzhny is the one.
Yeah. No, Zaluzhny is the one.
Syrskyi is the one in command.
Yeah, Syrskyi is General 200. 200 is the classification for casualties. 200 is KIA. 300 is WIA, wounded in action. 400 is deserters. 500 is like mentally gone. It's old Soviet classification. So his nickname is General 200. Because he generates a lot of dead for his own side.
I think it's extremely sad, right? And this of course, this political instability doesn't make it easier for Russia then to also figure out who to work with in order to somehow wind this whole thing down.
Right,
but
right.
That's where we are. We are in an extremely internally messy situation, and that doesn't even take into account what's coming from the outside. But let's maybe shift gears a little bit and use the last 10-12 minutes to talk about Israel, because you made this observation to me that one of the things that's little understood is the impact of Christian Zionism and the origin of Christian Zionism on the genocide that is going on. Can you maybe expand on that a bit?
So yeah, Christian Zionism, if you go back, look at it. First of all, let's begin with this. Christian Zionism is a heresy. It is a heresy that's very rampant amongst the evangelicals, in the worldwide evangelicals. It is a heresy to the Orthodox Church, which being Orthodox, I'll say, is the first Christian church from which the Catholics broke in 1053. Catholics say it the other way, but
it was
Orthodox, so I'll say
it was a schism.
It's a schism. It's a heresy to the Catholics. It's a heresy to the higher Protestants, such as the Lutherans, the Church of England, and so on. It's a heresy that showed up in 1833 by the name of a guy by the name of Charles Darby. So this guy basically said, he took a verse from the Bible, from the Old Testament, that when the Lord comes, he will call the saints to him in the heavens. I'm paraphrasing. I should actually memorize the phrase fully. But so he built this theology that the Lord is going to come twice. So it's going to be a second coming and a third coming, or maybe second coming and second coming 2.1. The first coming is the Lord's going to come, and all his saints, which happen to be evangelicals, are all just going to teleport away. They're not going to die. They're going to teleport away. And it's over. And then everybody else, they're going to stay on the ground because they're all damned, and they're going to go eat each other and murder each other. And sometime, depending who you ask, between 7 and 1,000 years later, Christ will come again to judge all of them.
The teleporting away.
Hell on earth.
The teleporting away, funnily enough, is even the plot line of that movie, Left Behind, I think. Was
Yes.
So that is part of the eschatology, and that movie actually picked that up. But anyhow, back to you.
And depends on which way you look. Do they teleport away with their clothes, or do they teleport away naked?
Yeah,
because different issues. Their clothes are left behind, or they just disappear. And I've actually known people that they form support groups where they go to their damned neighbor, because he's not evangelical, their version of evangelical, because thousands of different versions of evangelical. Um, it could be a Baptist church and another Baptist church, and one is screaming they're going to hell, the other showing they're going to hell, even though they're both Baptists. It gets really insane when you get down to that level. But they go to their damned neighbor for support in that when I disappear and my family disappear, here's an extra key. Open the door and let our pets out so they don't die in the house.
I wonder, I mean, I have no idea. I wonder if these people really exist. I mean, that the
Oh
ideology,
yeah, oh
the
yeah,
idea
yeah.
can be there, but I wonder, okay.
Oh no, these people exist. I grew up in the South. There's a lot of them down in the South. They are very, very, very real. So they need the end of the world. It's a death cult that's afraid of dying.
So
Everybody
that's
comes
part
to
of the ideology. It's like the end is coming and we are very near to the end, so near that I need to give a key to my damned neighbor so he can water the plants.
right, right,
And those are the evangelical Christians that then are supportive of the Zionist idea because you actually need
right. They are
Jews
the
in Israel.
Christian Zionists, and to get the end of the world, like I said, they want the end of the world, but they're afraid of dying. As a Christian, I will go to the Lord and I will have my final judgment. And there's questions of how that judgment is, depending on which side of church, even inside the Orthodox Church, is done after I die. That's the only way. Joe was the only one that got teleported. Everybody else gets to die, and then they go to see Christ. If you're Christian, anyways, that's the view that you'd have. They want to skip the dying part, the becoming room temperature part. We want to skip that, and we just want to teleport away, kind of Star Trek like, I guess, or zap and you're gone. Yeah, I'm making a bit of a fun of it because to us it's an incredible heresy, but it's an incredibly dangerous heresy because they act on this. So to get the end of the world, you have to have Armageddon. To get Armageddon, you have to have the third temple. To get the third temple, you have to have an ethnically and religiously pure Israel or greater Israel. The Israelis want the greater Israel. I'm not quite sure with the evangelicals how much they care about a greater Israel, as long as there's an Israel with a third temple. But that means it has to be Orthodox, not ultra Orthodox, basically Orthodox Israel with only Jews, nobody else, and no other forms of Judaism. And they support that. What do you think, Huckabee and all this? And then on top of that, you get you get this other stream uh, in that there's dispensationalism, in that they misinterpret what the Bible says. You see, for Christians, from the beginning of the church, you have to go through a little bit of theology. I'm sorry if
I always
for
love
anybody that doesn't
theology.
want
Didn't believe in it,
it.
but I love it. It's very elaborate. It's very well crafted.
It is. Well, the beginning of the theology is the true Jews are those that followed Christ.
Yes.
Let's begin with that. So when they talk about the true Jews are the Christians, A. B, when they're talking about Jerusalem, and this is since the founding of the church, when they're talking about the Jerusalem, they're not talking about the physical Jerusalem. They're talking about the spiritual Jerusalem, which is the kingdom of Christ. The kingdom of Christ is the kingdom in heaven, the spiritual kingdom. As he said when Pontius Pilate was asking him, "Are you the king? Yeah, are you king of Israel?" He said, "My kingdom is in heaven." I'm paraphrasing again, but my kingdom is in heaven. I'm not the king of the physical world here, which is why Pontius Pilate said, "Well, I don't see any guilt in this man. And, I don't see a reason to execute him. He's not a threat to Rome, obviously, because he's not saying, I'm a physical king. I'm going to set a throne. I'm going to rip away a province from Rome." So the church from the very beginning was looking at this as Jerusalem is the spiritual Jerusalem. These people are looking at Jerusalem as a physical Jerusalem. And they're reading through that he who blesses the Jews will be blessed by God. And they're taking that as an actual statement, but as the people who are called the Jews now, whether ethnically, how much pure blood whoever is, I'm not going to get into that. That's whole separate issues, and that's not something I'm going to bother with getting into. Let other people do it or what have you. But the theological here statement is already anti-Christian, right? So you're not going to get a blessing by blessing those that killed Christ. because that's what the church has taught from day one. Again, I'm not saying this to spark any kind of ethnic violence or anything like that, but this is the historical theological teachings of the church. And this is when the evangelicals come in. Now, if you talk to these evangelicals, it's not that they suddenly love Jews, because they'll tell you one of two things. Either they'll all convert on the last day or they're all going to hell anyways. We just need them to get the temple going and the third and the Armageddon and we just need the end of the world. And you look at these people like, wow, you're really insane. There are ministries called End Times Ministries that do tourist trips. You can look them up on YouTube. There's a bunch of their videos on YouTube. And these ministers are standing with their tourist group of evangelicals. And here's going to be where the Chinese and the Russian armies of the Antichrist are going to be coming down, and America, because evangelical, they're going to, with God's help, they're going to smite them here, and this is going to be where Armageddon's going to be. And these people believe this, but here's the scary part: these people are in power.
Yeah.
Egg Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives, is an evangelical. Hexeth is an evangelical. And they flat out tell you, Hexeth says, I dream that my sons will fight for Israel. Okay, you're the Minister of War now. I mean, defense before that of the U.S. You should be thinking a whole different line of thought there than this. And there are 80 million of them in the U.S. There's lots of them in other countries. So this is a serious issue.
I mean, the interesting thing about this argument here about the influence, the ideological driven or the religiously driven evangelicals and their distribution also in the U.S. society and the political apparatus would mean that you don't even need Israel lobby in order to explain the power of this being joined by the hip. So in a sense, and I don't think you need either or. I think it can be both at the same time. But that is a second explanation to why the U.S. acts in a way concerning Israel that we just haven't seen in international relations ever before. I just can't think, maybe outside of Switzerland and Liechtenstein, of two sovereign nations being so joined to each other that it's just hard to fathom.
Well, you need the Israeli lobby for the non-evangelicals, like for example, Mark Rubio, or oh, good Lord, why can't I remember names when I really need to remember names?
Rubio,
or the Secretary of State.
That is Marco Rubio, Secretary.
Oh, that is Marco Rubio. I'm sorry, not Marco Rubio. Ted Cruz. That's the guy.
Cruz. Okay.
I got it mixed up in my head. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm horrible with names. Ted Cruz, for example. Both are Catholics. Both don't care that the popes from the Vatican was protesting the murder of Catholic Palestinians, because people forget there's lots of Orthodox and Catholic Palestinians. There are about 12% of the population. That Orthodox and Catholic Christians in Lebanon are 30-something% of the population. And Syrians were lots of Orthodox Christians. They don't, by the way, the evangelicals don't consider them Christians. They don't consider Orthodox and Catholic Christians. They're heretics to them. So even though they're the original church. So when they're getting killed off, okay, that's nothing big to worry about. And I've asked people that I've known, they're evangelicals, you do realize they're Christian churches being blown up. They're not real churches. It's hard to argue with that point.
So in a sense, what we're
can't
seeing,
change our mind.
What we're seeing is also like an inner Christian, not just disagreement,
yes,
but a split, right, of Christians, evangelicals versus then people like, let's say, now it's my turn with the names. Tucker Carlson, of course, who has completely different understanding of Christianity and like the Christian group to belong together, whatever the denomination.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson actually has a much more traditionalist view, and I've been watching his programs. It's evolving toward I would say, the Orthodox view of Christianity. It's a slow process, and there's actually quite a few evangelicals and other Protestants. Whole churches have converted to Orthodoxy, usually because the priests started they all want to know, be like the original church. Well, when you start historically looking at the original church, isn't disappearing. I'm talking again from the Orthodox point of view. Catholics have a little bit different view on that. I understand, but from the Orthodox point of view, the old church never disappeared. It wasn't this mysterious entity, this UFO thing, or
Yeah.
cryptozoology. It
Yeah.
didn't disappear. It's still there. It's 2,000 years old. You don't really have to look far to find it. And when they start looking at it, and they start looking at theology, and they go, oh, I mean, these people will never become Catholics for the most part because they despise Catholicism. They broke from Catholicism, but Orthodoxy is something new to them because they don't know it, and that's one way they get toward the old theology that is shared between the Orthodox and the Catholics, and they go and look at it and go, "Oh, we're wrong." Okay, um, and it's this realization. So, but the majority, of course, the vast majority, in this case, they're set in the ways that they're set, and they're poking fingers between each other, between these different denomination evangelicals. Who's going to hell, who isn't going to hell. God is the only one decides at the end of the day who's going to hell, who's not going to hell. Not some preacher, not
Yeah.
some layman. If we're going to go down that route.
Right.
But
But
it does influence directly their politics, and that's the scary part of it. Now, Marco Rubio, there's a website in the U.S. that tracks how much APEC has favored politicians. Rubio was at 1.5 million. Cruz was at 2 million. So you wonder, why do they, as Catholics, really don't give a damn what the Pope says? Could it be something else that's influencing their their decision making, like their
I
bank
mean,
accounts?
the one thing that was crazy is that this idea that ever the Pope would have a say over the United States, and that of course goes back all the way to Kennedy, but that never ever was the case, right? I mean, the Pope never ever had the ear of the U.S. president. The opposite is the case. The Pope rather listens and tries to interact with the president somehow. But so in conclusion, what you're alerting us to is the underestimated impact of Christian evangelicals and Christian Zionism on this entire process that then on the other end spits out genocide in Palestine.
Yes, it's even questionable what came first, the chicken or the egg. Was it Christian Zionism or Jewish Zionism that appeared first in the UK, by the way? And it looks, in my opinion, it was the Christian Zionists that appeared first in the UK. Then the vast majority of the population in the UK are Church of England, which are not evangelicals in any kind of form. They're high-level Protestants. They're not. They're basically. It's a split of the Catholic Church into a mini Catholic Church with an English national flavor. And by the way, the English were Orthodox originally. William the Bastard, or William the Conqueror, if what you want to call him, when he defeated Harold at the Battle of Hastings. So Harold died, his two sons died, his brother died, his nephew died. All the men in Harold's line died at that Battle of Hastings. Harold's wife took his daughter, took ship, and sailed to Kiev, which was Russian, and she married a Russian, his daughter married a Russian prince. Because they were all Orthodox. They just went to the next big Orthodox country. Now, once the William the Bastard conquered, it became William the Conqueror, conquered England, he brought it into the Catholic Church, which is why he was blessed by the Pope to go conquer England, because England refused to go into the schism and stayed Orthodox. So Orthodoxy is the religion of the English. So what you get is you get this evangelical group that's making the Jews in England. This is 1800s, mid 1800s. The Jews in England into Jewish Zionists, and this works for the British elites because one, they get to get rid of the Jews. They all get to immigrate to Israel, and for them that's a bonus. And two, those Jews that are immigrating to England the Jews that are immigrating to the Holy Land are British because culturally they're British. There's still this religious maybe difference, but culturally they're British. So basically, they're creating a colony in the Holy Land, which is part of the Ottoman Empire at this moment. So looking longer term, we're going to rip a good chunk of the Ottoman Empire away from the Ottoman Empire. We're going to have a foothold of the British, of the English Empire, the British Empire in the Middle East, where we previously haven't had anything. So
Yeah.
it's a win-win.
Yeah,
and then for the British elites.
And the British hand over the staff to the Americans, and we are where we are today with this absolute catastrophe. But
Yes,
Stas, I do have to
I understand.
wind it down because this discussion with you is always very interesting, and it takes us into many routes. But I think you're pointing out a very important thing: the Christian evangelicals and their impact on the political process that creates this. People who want to follow you, they should go to your YouTube channel, I suppose, or where would you want them to go?
Yep. Okay, so on X, it's under Stas Krapivnik. On YouTube, it's at Mr. Slavic Man, Slavic with a K, not a C. I also have 2 channels on Telegram. One channel is, the English channel is Stas was there. The Russian channel is Stas today обратно.
I will put the links into the description below, and everybody do check out Stas' work and his political analysis. It's worth following. So Stas, thank you very much for your time today.
Pascal, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.